Good evening. Thank you for joining me on Black News Tonight. I'm Marc Lamont Hill. Combating voter suppression in the country. That's what U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland vowed today, adding that Justice Department officials will step up enforcement of federal voting laws. Recently, Republican lawmakers have been pushing to enact tighter election rules, and in a speech earlier this evening, Garland insisted that the right to vote will be given for everyone.
We know that expanding the ability of all eligible citizens to vote is the central pillar. That means ensuring that all eligible voters can cast a vote, that all lawful votes are counted, and that every voter has access to accurate information.
He's pledging to increase staffing within the department's Civil Rights Division, making it clear that the Justice Department does not plan to stay on the sidelines of the voting battles that have erupted across the country. A federal judge has halted a loan forgiveness program for black farmers after white farmers filed a discrimination lawsuit. The judge issued a temporary restraining order yesterday, suspending the program. That program pays up to 120% of direct or guaranteed farm loan balances for black farmers. It was created by President Biden as part of his $1.9 trillion COVID-19 pandemic relief plan. White farmers argue that it's not fair because they aren't eligible for the program. The filing seeks a court order prohibiting the USDA from applying racial classifications when determining eligibility for federal relief. The teen who filmed George Floyd's murder will be honored by the Pulitzer Prize Board. Darnella Frazier shot the video on her cell phone. She recorded former police officer and now convicted murderer Derek Chauvin pressing his knee into George Floyd's neck. She then posted the video on Facebook. Her video sparked protests against police brutality all around the world. The board said that Frazier's actions highlight, quote, the crucial role of citizens in journalists' quest for truth and justice. We have to pause just for a second, family. We're giving this woman a recognition, an award for videotaping the murder of a black man, an unarmed black man who was killed by the police. There's something oddly perverse about that to me. I'm glad that she had the courage to do it. I'm glad that Pulitzer is recognizing the relationship between her citizen journalism and the outcomes we saw on the street and in the courtroom. There's no criticism of the sister who recorded the video, and I'm not mad at the award itself. I'm just mad that this is our circumstance. And secondly, what comes with that recognition? What comes with that citation? Does it come with mental health support? Does it come with a therapist? Does it come with some sort of financial recognition? She witnessed trauma. She witnessed, as many of us did, the death of that man. That award is not going to help her sleep at night. It's not going to help heal the wounds of state violence. I hope that award comes with more than just a piece of paper, because that sister deserves a whole lot more than that. All right, now we can move on. After reporting negative news almost on a daily basis from the glorious state of Texas, because y'all know Texas be tripping, here is finally some positive news. Texas lawmakers finally got their wish after pressing a federal board for the second time to change the racially offensive names of geographic locations in the state. Yesterday, the U.S. Board on Geography unanimously approved the name change request. There were 16 sites that made this request across the state of Texas, and some of the names were things like Negro. These were requests that were rejected since 1998. They've been trying to change the name Negro since 1998. One site with a change was a tributary. It was called Negro Branch. It'll now be called Ada Simon Creek, named after an award-winning black writer and activist. Doesn't that sound better than Negro Creek? To some people it does, but of course, to some it probably doesn't. Nevada is the latest state taking on critical race theory. Parents now are clashing over curriculum proposals. People packed into a school board meeting this week in Reno, Nevada, as trustees considered expanding the K-5 curriculum to include more teaching about equity, diversity, and racism. Opponents say that the proposal would lead to the teaching of critical race theory. Dun, dun, dun. Critics say that such lesson plans teach students to hate the United States. A conservative group even suggested, I need y'all to hear this, a conservative group even suggested that teachers wear body cameras to ensure that they're not teaching such lessons. And on top of the list for those such lessons, causing fear for many conservative groups, is the 1619 Project. Created by Nikole Hannah-Jones, the 1619 Project is a collection of essays first published in the New York Times Magazine in August of 2019. It was the winner of the 2020 Pulitzer for commentary, and the project has since then sparked so much controversy. The New York Times Magazine editor-in-chief, Jake Silverstein, he says in his introduction to the project, the goal of the 1619 Project is to reframe American history by considering what it would mean to regard 1619 as our nation's birth year. Doing so requires us to place the consequences of slavery and the contributions of Black Americans at the very center of the story we tell ourselves about who we are as a country. Joining me now are two scholars, two students of history who will discuss whether or not slavery is indeed foundational to the United States. I have Dr. Peter Wood. He is the president of the National Association of Scholars. And I have Dr. Greg Carr, the chair of the Department of Afro-American Studies at Howard University. I want to thank you both for joining me. Peter, I'm going to start with you. 1619, let me stipulate one thing. I think that historians in general would concede that 1619 as such may not be the only year that we could appeal to for the beginning of slavery. We could look back decades prior to that. So I don't want us to get too pedantic. I don't want to get into the weeds of whether or not 1619 is the precise year to think about slavery, but rather to ask the question, does it make sense to imagine the birth year of the United States based on a date like 1619, which centers around the project of slavery, rather than, say, 1776? What do you say?
Well, of course it makes sense. It's an idea, and it's an idea that's worth discussing. I think that when it's weighed in balance with the claims of other dates as foundational to the United States, we end up with an interesting conversation. That is, foundational means a lot of things, and the institution of slavery that grew up over the ensuing centuries is certainly a foundational piece of American history. So knowing when it began and how it began is a part of that. I'm completely open to that idea. On the other hand, once we've worked our way through these debates, I would say there are other claims about American history that probably do outweigh the idea that the White Lion, the pirate ship that brought 20-some slaves to Jamestown in August 1619, was the event which shaped the ensuing course of American history. So yes, it's a good idea to debate about, to think about, to weigh, but it's probably not dispositive.
Peter, let me ask you one more question before I move over to Greg. What are some of those events that you would say are more or equally perhaps foundational or central to the founding of America? What are those events that are more influential than slavery?
Well, first of all, there's just the reality that the Europeans managed to create a technology, that is, ships that could cross the ocean reliably to bring people here. Also ended up that those same ships could bring slaves here. So there's technological issues, there are economic ones, and there's ones of ideals, the ideal of a nation capable of governing itself and the ideal of liberty, both of which are treated by Nikole Hannah-Jones as essentially lies, actually are foundational to our country. They were imperfectly realized for a long time, but nonetheless, those ideals had a huge influence over the country that we became, and they still do. So I would say that if we're talking about foundations of America, there's both material ones and ideal ones that get sort of pushed to one side if you concentrate on slavery as the pivotal institution. It's a pivotal institution.
Greg, I want to give you a chance to respond.
Yeah, and thanks for having me, Mark. And good to be with you, Professor Wood. How could enslavement be anything other than foundational to people of African descent? It's the reason we're having this conversation in English. I think, this question of slavery is foundational. It's foundational to Western civilization. Now, of course, enslavement, unfree labor has existed through time and space, different places, but context matters. And just like corporations, the church, the papacy, really, uh, um, uh, the idea of university education, the formations, these formations come out of Europe. I would say that Magna Carta is equally, if not more important than any date in the Western Hemisphere. All of the settler colonies in the Western Hemisphere that become settler states follow the same basic trajectory. And it is the idea, I think, that we are looking at this from the wrong end of the experience. In other words, trying to back map this narrative, and all narratives are fictions ultimately, to back map this narrative to a specific date is really a fight over ideology, over culture. This isn't a nation. I think it's less a nation than it is a state formation with many different types of people in it. And in this case, enslavement, which is commingled with the idea of blackness in the Western Hemisphere, is something that anchors the United States of America in narrating itself as a white settler state, the exception to which are the non-whites. And at the bottom of that hierarchy are black people. It's just that basic.
I want to pause because I want to follow up with you on that question, Professor Carr, but we got to take a commercial break. We'll come back and we're going to continue this incredible conversation about the premise and promise of the 1619 Project and the broader conversation about slavery with my two esteemed guests. Everybody stay with me. Black News Tonight returns after this. Welcome back to Black News Tonight. We continue our discussion around the main premise of the 1619 Project and the question around whether or not slavery is foundational to our nation. Of course, I'm back with scholars Greg Carr and Peter Wood. Dr. Wood, you called on the Pulitzer Committee to withdraw the prize given to Nikole Hannah-Jones. Why?
The immediate reason was the stealth editing of the 1619 Project. What was printed by the New York Times in August of 2019 was changed several times digitally and disseminated in that form without any acknowledgement by the Times that that had happened. When Nikole Hannah-Jones was called on it in September of 2020, she lied. She said that the original thing had said what the later redacted version said. The presentation of a journalistic enterprise of such note involving stealth and skullduggery was just, in my view, a violation of the principles on which the Pulitzer Prize was created. It's a prize in journalism, and her opinion piece could have been changed. It maybe should have been changed since there were evident mistakes in it, but it couldn't have been changed surreptitiously.
One of the things you said about it was you said the Times wants to reimagine the European version of America as founded on slavery and stained in every possible way by the continuing effects of slavery. Is there a compelling argument, a persuasive argument to the contrary? Is there any way to imagine this nation as not being unavoidably, thoroughly stained by the impacts of slavery?
Of course there is. There are plenty of institutions that were not founded in slavery. The idea of importing various forms of Christianity and Judaism and other religions into the New World was not founded in slavery. It touched slavery as it touched everything else, but there's one example. The ideals laid out in the Declaration of Independence of human equality were not created by means of slavery. I think it's important to avoid reductionism, taking everything and treating it as an emanation of a single idea or a single event. And what happens with the 1619 Project is a severe form of reductionism. It tries to compound every aspect of our society into the effects of one institution. That's just not true.
Professor Carr?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with Professor Wood in this regard. The 1619 Project doesn't go far enough. It doesn't go back far enough. As far as I'm concerned, 1619, 1776, 1787, they're all essentially about the same thing. It's about back mapping this aspirational vision of an inclusive America into the narrative of America. But in fact, The United States of America, as I said, is a settler colony. That's why I mentioned Magna Carta. The idea of private property and ownership. When you see Jefferson and those guys drafting the Virginia statutes and then ultimately what ends up in the Constitution, it's a property document. Private property is not unique to the West, but it's certainly at the center of the Western settler enterprise. And so when you start thinking about the fact that the idea of racializing people, really in terms of Western Eurasia, what we call Europe, really begins over there, more specifically, probably most importantly, in the Iberian Peninsula. So Christianity, which is in many ways an African export, gets remixed in Europe and is used as a cudgel against the Muslims. That attitude then spills into the Western Hemisphere. Remember, as you said, we don't get into dates like that, but almost 100 years before, the Spanish have some enslaved Africans in South Carolina who revolt. I'm saying all this as a prelude to this point. Whiteness as a political entity has kind of bonded itself to this interpretation of human experiences that, I agree, reduces those human experiences to something that allows whiteness to be the default normative position. That's why people talk about color blindness. There's no such thing. Whiteness becomes the lens through which we look at everything, through the reasonable actor in the law. And you've been trying to explain this in critical race theory, and well, I think quite well over the last couple of weeks. But as we think about these things, we have to understand that enslavement, a human phenomenon in the Western Hemisphere, really is identified with blackness, and blackness is bonded to those people who were taken out of Africa. So not only is it foundational, it's the organizational logic for the entire project. And what 1619 is doing, I don't think threatens the America. It may extend the life of the state by saying include black people. Now, whether or not it's going to do that, I'm not sure, because I think this 1619 discussion, this critical race theory discussion, it has nothing to do with 1619. The numbers to keep in mind are 2022 and 2024. That's the next two federal elections. They're not interested in learning. They're interested in winning elections and maintaining power.
So that's an important place to actually go. And this is actually a place where you two would both agree, which is that these intellectual projects, these curricular projects, these educational proposals are political as much as they are, as we would say in the academy, epistemological. They're not just about knowledge, they're about the politics that are attached to it, right? So the question I have for you, Greg, is how should we imagine education that takes seriously our history, our past, that takes seriously the practice of slavery? How can we do this in a way that is helpful to students, that builds our character, that builds our knowledge base, but also allows us to move forward in ways that advance the cause of justice and humanity and ethics and so forth?
Well, I think we have to greatly expand the scope of voices we're listening to. And I'm not talking about contemporary voices. There's very little original in terms of interpretive frame in the 1619 project. You see black people writing about this and talking about this as early as the late 18th century in this country. So we have to start with that. We have to look at what Carter Woodson and I were doing in the Journal of Negro History and the Negro History Bulletin. We have to go back to the 19th century and think about this during the Reconstruction era. If we're going to talk about a founding of America, I would argue that it's really the Civil War and Reconstruction. Look at the debates and the discussions that are going on there and understand that, and you know this, we all three of us know this, newspapers do not create curriculum. The idea that the 1619 project was going to carpet bomb K-12 and university education, when they called me and said, we're going to send you copies, I said, that's great. I'll take it and put it in my curriculum right now. If you answer this question, what, did you send it to Harvard and Yale and Stanford and the University of Chicago and Florida? Did you send it to Texas? If not, don't be carpet bombing. You act like teachers were waiting for this to drop out of the sky. We have to listen to the voices of those who have lived this, because in many ways, this is not really a debate, it's politics. And in terms of any newspaper, this is elites talking to each other, when in fact, the lived experiences of people of African descent, I think would probably shock people when you start talking about patriotism, when you start talking about narratives of identifying as Americans. It's much more layered than that. And the solution to the question you raised, I think, really relies on us listening to the people who have lived this history over the last couple of centuries, 2.5 centuries.
Peter, I'll give you a chance to respond before we go.
Well, I don't have much to disagree with there. I think that that's a pretty good summary of how history should be taught. We need to be paying attention to the sources of history, which are the lived experiences of people, to the extent that we can recover them through the documentary record or through other sources of tradition and so forth. That's definitely needed. The debates that we're having right now are indeed intellectual debates that involve scholars staking out positions. I'm one of those people. I wrote a book titled 1620, A Critical Response to the 1619 Project. I'm staking out positions too. I don't think this is all just a matter of storytelling. This is a matter of actually trying to get at some deep truths that aren't necessarily right there on the surface to be picked up. And we always have to be aware of things that past historians have missed along the way. So it seems to me that the 1619 Project has been a good door opener. It's brought into discussion things that needed to be talked about. I don't think it's a good door closer. It doesn't give us a settled curriculum or a final account of history such as would enlighten the coming generations. That's what we're really talking about here. What should students learn about their past being their personal past, but also the past of the nation to which they belong. If I'm going to disagree with Dr. Carr about anything at all, it's that I think nations are real entities and that they need to be taken seriously, and that the African American experience is a vital part of the history of this nation and needs to be told.
Ooh, that would be a great place to unpack for a whole other show, and I'm gonna have you both back to make sure we do that. Professor Carr, Professor Wood, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a great conversation. Exactly what we love to do here at Black News Tonight. Everybody, let us know what you think. Make sure you